Alright, it's that time of year again. We're already on to fall, and every good fall, never mind. Every good fall, guys, comes a great horror movie to watch. And what will it always start off with for this fall? Let's see, well, I got a suggestion from one of my social medias, from a user named John Lindsay 289, to check out a movie about a guy named Herbert West, who has a very good head on his shoulders and another one in a dish on his desk.
Drop on by the Clown Cafe. Drop on by the Clown Cafe. The grub is downright gruesome, but your appetite's obey. 'Cause food's a little funny, food's a little funny, food's a little funny at the Clown Cafe. Drop on by the Clown Cafe, your favorite meals on wheels. The menu is disgusting and it's full of special deals. Nothing here is good for you, so grab yourself a tray. 'Cause food's a little funny at the Clown Cafe. Drop on by the Clown Cafe. Drop on by the Clown Cafe. Gobble up your order quick before it runs away. 'Cause food's a little funny at the Clown Cafe. Why not visit after school and have yourselves a bite? An appetizing appetizer certain to delight. We haven't done it right unless it makes your teeth decay. 'Cause food's a little funny at the Clown Cafe. Drop on by the Clown Cafe. Drop on by the Clown Cafe. The grub is downright gruesome, but your appetite's obey. 'Cause food's a little funny, food's a little funny, food's a little funny at the Clown Cafe.
Hey everyone, Staunchy Corleone here, and welcome to Halloween Horror Movie Reviews, Season 4. Started this since we started YouTube, and it's been going successful so far. Well, third season wasn't as successful as I hoped, but so this one we're going to spice up things a little more differently here. I'm going to be recording these episodes a week before their premieres, and maybe that, and actually watching the films during that time. And maybe it'll be a little more successful this time, and not overly a little less behind. And I was a little out of horror film ideas to watch, so the thumbnails are going to be a little more creative, and since I was out of horror movie ideas to watch for this season, I was kind of forced to go do requests for this one time. This does not mean I'm going to do requests now. This is only one time I was out of horror film ideas, so I needed some help suggestions for this season to review. And technically speaking, I did technically come up with this one myself, but one user did suggest, long before I decided to do this for this season, long before, one user had around springtime, had recommended me to watch a certain horror comedy film from H.P. Lovecraft. He's one of OCP Communications fans. This was a movie for episode 1. It's going to be a movie that was long suggested by John Lindsay 289. It was on one of my social medias. Suggested I watch H.P. Lovecraft's Re-Animator, which was, who was this directed by again? Okay. Now, stories by H.P. Lovecraft. It was directed by Stuart Gordon. Alright, there we go. Stuart Gordon's Re-Animator, but it's based off a story from H.P. Lovecraft. So, yeah, Re-Animator is going to be the first episode, and how these episodes go with the requests. I'm going to be mentioning the user who requested them, because I want to credit the user, since it was their idea. I checked this one out. And it's also going to be, say, suggested or recommended by, suggested or requested by in the description below as well. So the user knows I give them, so the user knows I gave them a shout out for the suggestion or request, because they're the ones who requested the movie. And this is the only time I'm doing this, guys. This does not mean I'm doing requests for good. This is just this one time. But let's get on with this review. Now let's kick off this season. What's the plot of this? Well, assessed with the idea of overcoming the obstacle of death and determined to vindicate himself by backing up his theory, ambitious medical student Herbert West arrives in New England after surviving a horrific incident at the Institute of Medicine in Switzerland. And before long, Herbert picks up where he left off, at first experimenting with dead feline tissue, and then with fresh human cadavers, taking his skeptic roommate Dan Kane into joining his audacious project. But as the two visionary scientists burrow deeper and deeper into uncharted territory, West's reanimated corpses start walking around the campus, catching the eye of Dr. Hill, Herbert's old arch-nemesis, who yearns to take credit for his astounding discovery. Now the dead rise again, even with a bit of help. However, can the young reanimator harness the power of his philosopher of Green Regent? How is this made? Well, the idea to make Re-Animator came from a discussion Stuart Gordon had with friends one night about vampire films. He felt there were too many Dracula films and expressed a desire to see a Frankenstein film instead. Someone asked if he had read Herbert West's Re-Animator by H.P. Lovecraft. Gordon had read most of the author's works, but not the story, which was long out of point. He went to the Chicago Public Library and read their copy. Originally, Gordon was going to adopt Lovecraft's story for the stage, eventually decided along with writers Dennis Powell Lee and William Norris to make it as a half-hour television pilot. The story was set around the turn of the century, and they soon realized it would be too expensive to recreate, so they updated it to the present day in Chicago instead, with the intention of using actors from an organic theater company. They were told the half-hour format was not sellable, so they made it an hour, writing 13 episodes. And special effects technician Bob Greenberg, who had worked on a John Carpenter movie called Dark Star, told Stuart Gordon that the only market for horror was in feature films, and introduced him to a producer named Brian Yuzna. Gordon showed Yuzna the script for the pilot and the 12 additional episodes. The producer liked what he read and convinced Gordon to shoot the film into Hollywood. And because of all the special effects involved, Yuzna then made a distribution deal with Charles Band's Empire Pictures in return for the post-production services. But then after they viewed the initial dailies, Empire became involved in the actual production, making a number of suggestions like the recruitment of Mark Alberg as a cinematographer for the film. And according to Powley, the first draft of the script contained no comedy whatsoever, and the film's comedic elements only came out over further revisions and during the actual production. And when it came to describing the film, Yuzna described the film as having the sort of shock sensibility of an Evil Dead within the production values of, like, The Howling. Gordon cited Revenge of Frankenstein as a major inspiration for the film. John Nolan worked on the film's gruesome makeup effects, using what he described as disgusting shots brought out from the Cook Country morgue of all kinds of different lividities and different corpses. The morgue set was based on the aforementioned Cook County morgue, which was newly built and featured cutting-edge technology. Gordon opted for this look since he felt old morgues had been overdone in horror films, and Nolan and Gordon then used a book of forensic pathology to present how a corpse looks once the blood settles in the body. And they created a variety of odd skin tones. A variety, anyways. Nolan said Re-Animator was apparently the bloodiest film he worked on, according to him. And in the past, he never used some more than a couple of gallons, which was 7.6 liters of blood on a film, but on Re-Animator, he used 12 times as much. Then when it came to casting Herbert West, the studio decided to cast Jeffrey Combs. Combs had never read any H.P. Lovecraft material before his casting, and he was taken back by the script, but he then said he only took the role because he needed the work, and he assumed the film would never reach a large audience. So, we should all know, Re-Animator would end up being the first film to have a collaboration between Gordon and Combs. The second one ended up being for Beyond, released after this movie in 1986. And being released around, 1985, or after that, it had gone on to launch a series which had two sequels, by Re-Animator and Beyond Re-Animator, 1990 and 2003. It got released to positive reviews from people, and ever since then, Re-Animator has gone on to become a cult film in the horror genre and the horror comedy genre. Now, as for my reaction, well, I never seen this movie before, I never had saw this movie before, so this was a first time watch. I got suggested this film by, like I mentioned, by John Lindsay 289, and I decided I will watch the film. And then around the years, as I actually did watch this around spring when I first bought this DVD at a vintage video store. But I decided I would not review it until this season, because I mostly try to review horror films around this season, or I've got no ideas. Unless it's horror sequels from certain franchises. I decided to make it episode 1. As I was browsing episode for Halloween Horror Reviews 4, I decided this was going to be episode 1 for Halloween Horror Reviews Season 4. So I rewatched the movie a second time last night. And heck yes, on both watches, this movie is indeed a horror classic, and it deserves to be called one. Re-Animator is one of those fun horror movies that is so over the top that it's just a lot of fun to watch. It's like the spectacular Evil Dead films. Not quite to that same level of skillful horror and comedy mix. Ironically enough, it definitely should be a testament to the quality of the rest of the movie that is able to work so well despite prominently featuring soundtrack that is this rip-off of the Psycho soundtrack. But it's amazing to me that Richard Bond, who composed the music for this film, didn't really think anyone would notice. Didn't really think anyone would really notice this incident, but luckily everyone else in the production was right on the mark. The story is loosely based off the works of H.P. Lovecraft, titled Herbert West's Re-Animator. The whole film is definitely weird. It's definitely a story not many people would tell, but it just so happens director Stuart Gordon was able to pull some off with just enough weird and clever things to make it really enjoyable. And playing Herbert West is Jeffrey Combs, and he's definitely born to play the role, as the callous, non-emotional scientist named Herbert West. And unless he's dealing with his work. Jeffrey Combs was so good at the character, and he makes it look like he has no idea what he's doing. He definitely really seems like he does. And of course, being from 1985, Re-Animator is still a really great horror movie. And even a classic horror movie. Why? There's different factors adding up to this. It's based on an H.P. Lovecraft story, and has a wonderful performance from Jeffrey Combs. And it's definitely the first film I've seen from Jeffrey Combs. The story Re-Animator, to those who are unfamiliar with the works of H.P. Lovecraft, it's about Herbert West, who studying reanimated dead tissues goes awry and drunk with power. The scientist creates for more specimens to conduct his experiments on, but reanimating is not enough for West, and he starts off to dabble in crossing living matter and animating it to life. And helping with the ghastly work is his roommate Dan, who's played by Bruce Abbott. When it comes to the special effects of the movie, sure, the effects in this movie are ridiculously outdated and crude by today's standards, but back then they were quite good and actually were impressive to look at. When you see it today, the effects make the movie appear campy and sort of goofy, but still, the movie is driven by the solid story and not the visual effects. Jeffrey Combs delivers this wonderfully crazy performance as Herbert West, the scientist in the movie who's determined that he has discovered a scientific method to beat death. Sorry, guys. And is desperate to try it out on a human being rather than small animals, on whom he has had remarkable success with. He plays a completely one-dimensional character, a genius scientist whose mental capacity is tinged with madness, but what is counterbalanced by the fact that he may very well be desperate to try something potentially immoral, which could also potentially revolutionize medicine. Maybe his intentions are good after all, but for the purposes of the film, he just wants to get his hands on some fresh corpses, which is definitely a great premise for a horror film like this. The movie operates in its own world, like the Evil Dead films did. It takes place in a horror genre, but it wants to combine some elements of drama as well, and we have a real scientist who's truly brilliant. He's still in medical school, but he's often smarter than his often published professors, criticizing their work for being incorrect or even plagiarized. He's very quick to make enemies. And I would think his line of work might be easier the less people he had watching him, but it's so unfortunate that he is so good at making people not like him. Mere days after he rents out a room from a couple of other students, they find their cat dead in his refrigerator. Where Re-Animator succeeds is in its gleeful, no-holds-barrel approach. The story is extremely preposterous, and Gordon and his cast do not attempt to lend proceedings any gravity, opting instead for an over-the-top, anything-goes, tongue-in-cheek style. From the opening pre-credit scene, in which a character's eyes bulge and burst from his skull, viewers know that this is going to be all about the gore, in a way. And what a lot of gore we get in this film. The FX team deliver a huge rain of splattery effects, which impress, given the limited budget of the movie. Most are extremely effective. And highlights of this include a brain removal, a juicy finger biting, a bone saw through the torso, a decapitation with a spade, a crushed head thrown at a wall, an exploding stomach with writhing intestines, and the infamous scene which a stark naked Meg receives a bit of a severed head. The most disturbing part of the film. Very well done scene, too. And to many fans, you could call this somewhat of a dark comedy, even. Although, compared to the people who call this a dark comedy, I found the movie more bizarre than funny. There's a few moments where I did laugh because of Jeffrey Combs' ability to give his crack character a dry sense of humor, or just how clumsy the zombies are. Speaking of which, these zombies are definitely not your standard zombie. Like, this is not the tear your flesh off your skin, down to the bone zombie. The zombies depicted here, they're just plain angry. It's like they didn't want to be reanimated, and they're mad at Wes for reanimating them. Now, although I said this is gory, it's not like little crazy gory to satisfy a gore hound. Not like Dead Alive gory, or the first Evil Dead gory, or Terrifier 2 gory. Just like gory, decently gory. If you're a fan of like crazy nude scenes, you'll like this one. There's definitely a lot of nudity in this film. Like I said before, the film is just strange. And when it comes to Richard Brand's score, I'll say this. Brand doesn't really create much scary tones. He does create some tension, but his music seems choppy and unconventional, which kind of makes it hard to feel anything from it. And it's a strange film, but definitely enjoyable in a lot of areas. As with any horror movie this caliber, there definitely has to be a bad guy. And in our case, from our point of view, it's Dr. Hill, who experiences first-hand effects of Wes's serum. The head on the box cover belongs to him. And is this guy right here. I remember seeing this poster as a kid, and the funniest thing is, the head kind of looked like Robin Williams, so I originally thought the head character was Robin Williams. Was played by Robin Williams for a second. It kind of looked like him in a picture. It's not, guys, but I just thought it did when I was younger because it just kind of looks similar. Rest in peace to Robin, by the way. And Hill eventually sets his sights on Dan's lovely blonde girlfriend Megan, who's played by Barbara Crampton. And Hill steals Wes' serum and more dead rise, and putting Wes and Dan in a nasty, gory predicament. And how could a film that is so explicitly graphic and perverted in nature be fun? It's because every person involved in the make of Re-Animator was smart enough to not take it seriously themselves. Everything in this film is so wildly over the top, they can't help but chuckle right along with them, as they definitely wink their eye at you. There may be certain moments of the film that would definitely sicken even the most hardcore horror film fanatic, but since Yasna Gordon never once let Re-Animator sink into the tediousness by the numbers game of other horror films of this nature, these same scenes become intentionally cartoonish and silly. Yeah, they don't do it like a Serbian film or the Human Centipede, where they just want to shock the audience. They just want to be so gratuitously shocking by adding newborn porn or newborn rape or attaching a mouth to a butthole and have the person poop in the person's mouth, like in those films. No. They don't do stupid stuff like that. Re-Animator makes it as goofy as possible, and it's the kind of gore you'd find in a hardcore 80s horror film back then. But more than anything, the film owes its life to the cast. Jeffrey Jeffrey Combs just once again gives a great performance, and definitely the kind of perfect person to play a person who's a mad semi-mad scientist. In this Klein role, there's definitely, I don't think anyone else could have really topped the role very well as much as Jeffrey Combs. And when Combs seems to play that he's the smartest man on the planet and the rest of us are Neanderthal, we don't hate him for this implication at all. He's so good at making us believe he's the smartest man since Albert Einstein. We're definitely nothing but Corleone man by comparison, and we love him for it just the same. Maybe crazy, but he's a fun kind of crazy. And some of the best scenes are definitely the most ridiculous scenes of the movie. The actors give a deadpan serious performance as silliness ensues, and where it could make it seem like they're a good actors in a crummy movie, it instead feels like a tongue-in-cheek horror movie. In one scene, a zombie cat attacks, and it's clearly a cheap puppet, but these guys play it off like this is one frightening little feline. Another scene involves a decapitated body's large intestine flying out and choking a character while the rest of the body parts jump up and down. It's so ridiculous, but it's also so perfect. And think of this, guys. Re-Animator was made on a budget of less than $1 million, which is truly remarkable. There is a film budget in the world that could replace imagination during rampant throughout Re-Animator. And I do love how the finale of this movie goes. And how does the movie go? How does the finale go? Well, Hill's body starts to place his head between Megan's legs, but is interrupted by the arrival of Wes and Dan. Wes distracts Dr. Hill while Dan frees Megan. Dr. Hill reveals that he has reanimated and lobotomized several corpses from the morgue, rendering them susceptible to mind control as hell as he is. However, Megan's voice reawakens the protectiveness of her father, who fights off the other corpses as Dan and Megan escape. In the ensuing chaos, Wes ingests Dr. Hill's body with a lethal overdose of the regent, and Dr. Hill's body mutates rapidly and attacks Wes, who screams out to Dan to save his work before being pulled away by Dr. Hill's monstrous entrails. Dan retrieves a satchel containing Wes's regent and notes, and as Dan and Megan flee the morgue, one of the reanimated corpses attacks and strangles Megan. Dan takes her to the hospital emergency room and tries to revive her, but sadly, she's dead. And in despair, he injects her with Wes's regent, and after the scene fades to black, Megan apparently revived can be heard screaming. All in all, guys, it's a nice mysterious way to end the movie, and it leaves you wondering, did they really stop the evil? Nice little ambiguous ending right there. However, I'll admit, there are some problems I can have with the film. Like, first off, the editing. Apparently, the original cut of the film ran for over 2 hours, and it was severely edited to improve the pacing. Apparently, there's an unrated version that kept all of its other gore and miss moments, which were definitely might have been vital to help clarify certain plot points. We mostly just got a choppy narrative with leaves unanswered questions, and the R version had much of the gore removed and some of the trim scenes reinstated, but neither version is really all that masterpiece worthy. And sure, the acting by the two leads isn't always the best from Bruce Abbott or Barbara Crampton, who Bruce is good at one stare, not so much on dialogue except for a few key scenes. Barbara Crampton, good screamer, and a nice body for the 80s. But on par with Abbott for talent. But that's the least thing to worry about, is they're supposed to be the bland leads. The movie's supposed to be about Herbert. Right? Herbert's our lead protagonist. What makes the film so incredible and enduring since its release is attention to real horror. The body that is just there in the background bolts up, oh no. It's some real insane comedy. It's not exactly a spoof either, since it's so during a subversion of the Frankenstein formula. Other than that, guys, I've got no other problems because I still adore this movie, okay? I adore Re-Animator regardless of any problems. In the end, Re-Animator is totally worth a watch and a buy for horror fans for any black comedy, and call horror fans and any fans of H.P. Lovecraft's works. And I'm glad I was suggested this movie. So if you have not seen Re-Animator, if you're a horror fan, give it a watch, maybe give it a buy depending on your opinion as well. Anyway, that's it for my review of H.P. Lovecraft's Re-Animator. And wondering how to rank H.P. Lovecraft's Re-Animator? Here's how I'm going to rank this movie. So overall, if you love H.P. Lovecraft and love cult horror films with dark humor, then be sure to check this one out and watch it and buy it for your horror collection, no doubt. And if you're wondering how to rank Re-Animator, I'm going to give Re-Animator an 8.5 out of 10. There we go. That wraps up the first episode, wraps up episode 1 of Halloween Horror Reviews Season 4 for Re-Animator. Now you can go back on the shelf, now that you're all taken care of. And, alright. So, what's going to be the next episode? Well, our next one is going to be a movie that was suggested by Declan Kearns around the very time that I made a top horror films list on Letterboxd, and I saw a comment from Declan Kearns in the comments section of it, suggesting me I should check out a film from the director of Fatal Attraction himself, Jacob's Ladder. Yes, that's going to be our next episode. Episode 2 of this season is going to be Jacob's Ladder. And this is also going to be a first-time watch. After that, the next two after that were how this week's going to go. Jacob's Ladder. Then the next two were just ones I thought I was able to think of myself, which were Tremors and Wrong Turn after Jacob's Ladder. And then, of course, episode 5 will be the first rant or epic rant of the season. And and that's going to be a found footage film. You'll see what that found footage movie is going to be on that part. But the found footage one was one that was requested by DJ Disney. That's the only hint I'll give. But that episode's going to be a rant. But you'll find out the movie on that day. You'll find out the movie after I finish reviewing Wrong Turn. But yeah. Glad I checked out Re-Animator, and can't wait to check out Jacob's Ladder tonight. Until then, guys, that'll be it for this review. Thank you all for watching. If you like this and want to see more, then don't forget to like and subscribe to Don G. Corleone.